So flop comes down Jack 10-3, and this is a pretty heavy board for Justin's range. You know, if you have an opponent like Adammo who's pretty insane with the post flop aggression, you can definitely like lay some traps. So because this flop is so heavy on Bonomo's range, I would expect Adammo to check a lot. And now let's think about the bluffs. Maybe Ace X would take this line at some frequency. Maybe King X would take this line at some frequency.
He has surrendered after
all in.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
All right, welcome everyone. Just a little insight into the hand that I'm about to break down for you. So in this one, it's from a 50K no limit tournament from the WSOP about 3 years ago before they implemented shot clocks. And as you can see the stacks here on the top left, Adammo has almost 17 million, Bonomo 5, and the other player has 2.4. And WSOP payouts are pretty steep, so the players are a little bit more incentivized to try to win. Also, shout out PokerGo for letting us use these videos. They're real sweet and helpful, and I definitely like reviewing them. So we're going to jump right in and see what transpires throughout this hand. Hey everyone, quick announcement. We are hosting a 3-day online bootcamp with myself, Alex Foxen, and Kristen Foxen, where we will teach you the most important aspects of crushing poker tournaments like live tells, how to build massive stacks, how to crush multi-way pots, and a lot more. This 3-day online bootcamp will take place on November 21st, 22nd, and 23rd, and you can check out the link in the description for more information. All right, now let's get back to the video. So the hand starts out with a 4x raise from the small blind from Adammo, pressuring the second place player. This is going to be pretty darn standard with maybe 100% of hands. I'm not sure how Adammo is creating his range in this spot, but in general, I'm a big fan of this. You know, from a math perspective, he's risking 3.5 big blinds to win 2.5. It has to work a little more than half the time to break even. So definitely like this for starters. Bonomo has a hand that is going to go into a pure call. So far so good and pretty standard from both players, I think.
To think that he might want some revenge for that event that happened a few weeks ago in Super High Roller Bowl, even though he still won almost $2 million.
I think it's not so much revenge he seeks. I think.
So flop comes down Jack 10-3, and this is a pretty heavy board for Justin's range. Like he's going to be defending all of the suited medium cards, all of the Broadway hands. Then he's also going to have some of like the offsuit ace X. The weaker ones, and then some suited kings and stuff like that. And so in general, you know, if Adammo starts with a small bet here, it's probably not going to be particularly profitable. And so I can definitely get behind checking this board. That's what I would lean towards doing, and maybe looking for a spot to delayed c-bet. But if you're only going to be one and done on a flop like this that favors your opponent's range so much, you're probably just going to be burning chips. So I definitely like to start off with the check here, and that is what Adammo will end up doing.
He understands that in that confrontation he ended up losing to Adammo, but he also knows that he's a very skilled and talented player. So if he had
anything from this on out would be a big bluff.
So as you can see, Bonomo is going to check behind here, and you know he's going to peer check his 10x. He's going to bet the majority of his Jack X. I think he's probably going to peer bet King Jack plus, maybe Queen Jack plus, and then start checking the Jack 9s and Jack 8 type of hands. So in general, a lot of checking here from Bonomo. I think he's also going to bet some straight draws. Definitely going to bet like the 9-7 suited, 7-8 suited, Queen 9 suited, 8-9 suited, stuff like that. And then I see a lot of logic for checking a hand like King Queen. You can bluff ace high out later by keeping it in. If they hit the ace, they have the reverse implied odds. So that's pretty much how I'd construct my range if I was in Bonomo's seat, and then pure betting like my 2 pairs and sets as well. You know, if you have an opponent like Adammo who's pretty insane with the post flop aggression, you can definitely like lay some traps, but I'd still be betting hands like bottom set in hopes that my opponent had 10x.
Yeah, Adammo recognizes that when he opens from the small blind and gets a call out of Bonomo from the big, that.
So this card's pretty spicy because Adammo has all the ace kings and Bonomo has 0. We also mentioned the range that Bonomo bets the flop with, and so there's really not a ton of Queen X. The only one that's really left is maybe like Queen 7 suited that chose not to bluff the flop, King Queen, which there's only 12 combos of. So there's not a ton of Queen X. He's going to be left with a lot of 10x in his flop check range, as well as other hands that fold. And so the 10x that we'd be targeting with like a big bet here in Adammo's seat would be the 10x without backup. So like 10-8, 10-7, and stuff like that. And then having the deuce of clubs on the turn is actually good because it means your opponent can't have king deuce suited and ace deuce suited. So now he has the ace deuce of hearts, spades, and diamonds, but not the ace deuce of clubs. So think of it from that perspective. So it's actually good on the turn, but if you bet and get called, it's bad on the river because then you want your opponent to have draws. So let's see what sizing Adammo comes with. You know, it's kind of an interesting spot just because if you look at the stack to pot ratio here, SPR, it's about 4.3. And so he's going to need to find an overbet somewhere if he wants to threaten stacks. And that's exactly what he does.
This will hit a lot of Bonomo's continuing range, so it did look like he was ready to give up on the flop. We'll see if this turn card changes anything. But
Love the nicotine advertisements in the background.
Bottom end works for him, right? Adammo, do I have that read right? Maybe, yeah. No,
no, if he hits
didn't
the
have the
king,
9,
then
so yeah.
Bonomo will have
Right.
two pair.
Right. So give Bonomo 2 pairs. Okay.
So because this flop is so heavy on Bonomo's range, I would expect Adammo to check a lot. So he could check hands like King 9 for the same reasons that Bonomo might check back a hand like King Queen, because you can get ace high to fold on a later street. And so you don't really necessarily want to start bloating the pot then. He could check 8-9 if he decides to check this flop at a super high frequency, you know. And so there are plenty of value combos here that Adammo can have. And you know, I think the worst hand that he would want to overbet here would probably be a hand like ace queen, maybe a hand like king queen or queen 10.
Now reaching.
What did he have? What did he have on the?
That's $1 million. 1,130,000. No,
135.
Okay, a little more.
60, I think it should be.
Took an extra orange.
Yeah, and this sizing is really intended to target a lot of Bonomo's one pair hands. Certainly, I don't think he expects.
So he went big. He went about 1.1 pots, which is pretty sweet. It sets up a SPR of 1 on the river. It's going to force folds from the 10-8 and 10-7, like I mentioned before, the small pairs, the ace high is no flush draw, king high is no flush draw. And so I think this is a great spot to come with a big bet. And yeah, I mean, I like what I see so far. Bonomo's hand, that 10 with the additional equity like this, is not only additional equity in the form of we can improve, but it's also a really good card to have because it reduces the frequency in which your opponent can have ace king. So like if you have 9-10, your opponent can have 16 combos of ace king. When you have king 10, your opponent can only have 12. And so like those type of things really do matter as far as the weighting of the ranges. And so it's more likely that Adammo is bluffing when you have that king because he has the same value in bluff combos, but now there's less combos of value. So yeah, we're gonna have a super standard call here.
But if
And we'll
Bonomo
see what
had
happens on the
10x,
river.
10x, and even if he turned to queen x, it would be hard to continue against this sizing. But the little hiccup here is that Bonomo has that straight draw to go with his one pair. He also blocks the straight himself, which is nice.
Justin cuts out a call.
Like I said, super standard so far,
$500,000 between the two.
at least from
top
Bonomo.
stacks. And a jack again on the.
So now things get a little bit more interesting. So we talked about what Adammo's overbetting range looks like on the turn for value. You know, so the jack is actually a really bad card for his one pair hands and a good card for his straights because Bonomo has more calls. So if he has a queen 10, you know, he's not going to go for a shove necessarily. And that kind of holds true for the king queens, the ace queens, in those combos. So all of a sudden, if he chooses to shove, he's repping more thinly, which means the ratio of value to bluffs, well, there's just less value now because all of those hands might choose a smaller sizing or check. And we're about to see the craziness of Adammo just ripping in this pot size bet on the river in a spot that, to be honest, I don't really love. Like, we think that there's a good chance that Bonomo has some Jack X in his range, like we mentioned. He could have a slow played straight that he checked the flop with. He could have a hand like King Queen and King 10 that are theoretically pretty good bluff catchers. And, you know, if you caught the announcers talking about it earlier, a few days before this, Adammo beat or busted Justin in the 300K super high roller. So, like, that dynamic of, like, him not wanting to get pushed around or, you know, wanting to get you back is certainly a factor that affects everyone, even at the highest stakes. So, I think we're about to see some suicide here, and let's see it.
The end. Bonomo best with his 2-pair.
So great to watch is you always have the feeling that he wants to go for it.
Yeah.
So he could possibly go for it. And that keeps us on the edge of our seats as viewers because some players, you know, they're just going to give up. But Adammo,
He always looks like there's something's
The
about to
wheels are
drop,
turned,
like
yeah.
you said, a shoe to drop. What's he gonna do?
I agree with the announcers. You just never know what Adammo's
will
going to
try
do.
go for it a lot. I don't know about this particular situation as played.
He has surrendered after.
All in.
Oh,
Oh, and he rips it.
yep.
I spoiled that for you. You saw it in the intro anyway. If there's one thing I do love about this bluff, it's watching Justin squirm. Like, I don't know why, just like seeing players, and I like Justin, just in these super tough spots. I just kind of like it. I don't know why. I don't know. Let me know if you guys like it or not.
Justin Bonomo, who has the 10, and now must figure out this puzzle for his tournament life.
And it is,
I'm impressed, kid. That's what I see right there.
yeah, it's an incredibly difficult position for Bonomo.
Do you enjoy these situations or do you find them stressful?
I mean, that's kind of a funny thing. Like, I do think some players just enjoy it. I think some players hate it, and that like deep psychological issue is kind of why they like shy away from these like big bluff spots. I wonder if Adammo just loves it, but yeah, I think that was pretty well said by Bonomo there. So let's kind of take a moment to discuss the value in bluff combos of Adammo and, you know, what Bonomo's thinking in this situation. So first of all, he's thinking like, what's my opponent's value range? Then how can we discount those holdings based upon the previous action? So pocket 10s and pocket 3s in Adammo's seat probably perceived to be betting a super high frequency on the flop, if not pure. Ace King, I could see Ace King checking, maybe betting at some frequency. So most of those 12 combos, because Justin has a king, are there, but maybe not all of them. He definitely might bet the flop at some frequency. And then you look at a hand like Queen Jack. Well, there's 2 jacks left and 3 queens left. So that leaves you with 6 combos, 2 times 3, super simple. The same reason that there's 16 combos of Ace King if you don't count Justin's hand, because there's 4 and 4. So yeah, just a little combinatorics for you there if you do want to get deeper into really breaking down how many combos of value and how many combos of bluffs that they have in a situation. But yeah, back to the hand. So like his value combos are Ace King, queens if they checked, jacks might have checked, but there's like not very many combos. Jack 10 probably would have bet, maybe checked. Again, it's kind of rare. And so he's really just repping primarily straights that definitely bet the flop at some frequency. And now let's think about the bluffs. Maybe Ace X would take this line at some frequency. Maybe King X would take this line at some frequency. And then you have, you know, if you're looking at this 9 deuce, there's 16 combos of 9 deuce, 16 of 9 4, 9 5, 9 6. If you add in some of the 8X shit cards, like the weighting of value to bluffs, there's just not enough value to balance it out if you're bluffing this many combos. And so in theory, when you're playing against players who aren't really thinking that deeply, like we know Bonomo clearly is, then you can get away with this stuff because they're thinking about the strength of their hand as far as the absolute strength. They're like, okay, I have a pair of tens here. I'm not going to call all in when this other guy has less chips than me, even if I fold. But when you're thinking about and playing against a high level player, all of a sudden they are thinking about it in terms of like, how many bluffs do they have? How many combos of value do they have? What's the weighting of those? Okay, I'm getting 2-1, which means Bonomo, just for pure chip EV, only has to be right 1/3 of the time here to break even. So if he thinks he calls and wins half the time, it's a massive win. And so that's where these things get real dicey, and also why it's so important to know who you're playing against. So that being said, let's watch the rest of the hand.
Is Justin talking to himself?
Exactly. I mean, I think all poker players are slightly masochistic, so I think they all like it a little. They like it a little bit.
This would certainly even things up quite a bit if Bonomo can find a call.
I mean, can we honestly say that we're surprised that Adammo went for it? I mean, given everything we've seen out of this man, he is a sicko, and he knows when to.
I wanted to briefly circle back to that deuce of clubs thing that I said on the turn. So if you remember, I said it's good on the turn because there's more no ace deuce of clubs, no king deuce of clubs that can call the turn. So it makes your turn bet more profitable. But on the river, it's actually a bad card to have because if you're bluffing this river, you want your opponent to have this deuce of clubs. You want them to have the king deuce of clubs, the ace deuce of clubs. So now there's less club combos that might be auto folds for Bonomo, and all of a sudden he's going to have more of these bluff catchers.
To put maximum pressure on his opponents, and he isn't afraid to go for it. It's one thing to think that you should do something, and it's another to actually pull the trigger.
Exactly.
And there's a big disconnect for a lot of players, but for Adammo, it seems pretty well connected.
What a position Adammo was put in.
I had to fast forward. So this, like I said, was before time banks, and Bonomo literally tanks right here for like 5.5, 6 minutes. If we actually had time banks in play, he would have used every time bank he had. And so that's kind of an interesting use of time banks, right? Do you want to save them for like those tricky turn spots or river spots? Or do you want to wait till you just have this like incredibly difficult decision? And I think it's super player dependent for you personally. Like you should make a decision that's best for you. But I will say, when's the last time I busted a tournament with a time bank or with 0 time banks? Almost never. And so I think that in general, we should use them more liberally in those small decisions and not necessarily save them for the big decisions.
With this one, I certainly have been in spots where I was on the fence lawn and I did allow my live read to sway my decision when it's that close of a decision, and sometimes you're wrong and sometimes you're right, and you have to live with that.
Maria talked about live reads there, and yeah, they're super relevant. It's significantly more difficult to pick up live tells on the elites, but I'll give you a little bit to look for from people in general. For starters, the timing in which they do things, whether it's check or bet or call. That's probably the biggest one that you notice. And you always want to be kind of baselining the decision. It's like, okay, I noticed that this guy check and snap called and then checked and called again. So maybe the snap call is stronger. So it's not that you can just say like, oh, X is strong and Y is weak. That's not how it works. It's about paying attention, developing a baseline, and then using that baseline to exploit your opponents later.
So,
And it's Justin who's sweating, not Adammo.
Dripping sweat.
Call.
oh wow.
What a
Wow,
call.
nice.
Wow.
Turn it over. The river bluff does not get by Justin Bonomo.
I really liked Adammo's expression there. I'm going to go back and show it one more time.
The river bluff does not.
So he sees Justin's hand and just gives it like a, like that makes sense. And to me, that says like in Adammo's mind, like that's a good bluff catcher. And it really is. Like Bonomo has a hand that he blocks value. He unblocks a lot of the bluffs that we mentioned before. So yeah, all around, couldn't agree more with Adammo's expression here. And if you guys like this video, let me know what type of content you want me to do more of. You can put hands in there, just say whatever. I'll definitely check the comments. So yeah, I'm starting off to do these online and would love some feedback. So enjoy your day.